Officials in 25 states in the District of Columbia have just sued the Trump administration, this time for using the government shutdown to suspend SNAP food assistance payments, which they argue is unlawful and, quote, arbitrary and capricious. Those are legal words, y'all. Now, the complaint argues this. USDA suspended SNAP benefits even though, on information and belief, it has funds available to it that are sufficient to fund all or at least a substantial portion of November SNAP benefits. In other shutdown news, a federal judge granted a preliminary injunction today, barring the Trump administration from using the shutdown to execute mass layoffs of federal workers. One of the attorneys general who is suing the White House over SNAP payments, Aaron Ford of Nevada, joins us now. He is also a candidate for governor in the state.
Attorney General, welcome. It's good to have you. How do you assess things right now on the ground where you are? Given the timeline that we've so far been under with respect to the shutdown, now really coming up against the hard reality of a lack of resources available to families to feed their kids, to provide health care. The filing claims that the Agriculture Department does have enough to fund all or substantial part of November SNAP payments. How do you reach the conclusion that the funds are going to be there? What's your assessment of where things are in your state? And what are you looking for from beyond the opening of the government? Because the other side of that, once it opens, everybody's got to play catch up because there's still resources that got to get to families and communities.
Well, Michael, great to see you this evening, and Simone and Alicia, thanks so much for having me on. Simone hit the nail on the head relative to the purposes of this lawsuit. Once again, the Trump administration is breaking the law, this time by cutting off food assistance that Congress has required it to provide. That's why I and my colleagues have taken Mr. Trump to court again, this time to force USDA to fulfill its legal obligations to keep SNAP benefits flowing and to keep food on, in my instance, Nevadans' families' tables. In my state, you asked what it looks like on the ground. 500,000 individuals receive SNAP benefits. Nevadans of every age, from children to grandparents, they're receiving this help from a program that puts food on the table. And in my state, when you have 1 or 4 Nevada children who don't know where their next meal is going to come from, this president is deciding that he'd rather let kids go hungry than to use contingency funds that Congress has set aside to keep families fed and that he's legally required to use. You combine that with the fact that we have a governor who vetoed a bill that could have guaranteed school lunches to our children. We are in dire straits, and that's why we've sued.
Attorney General, I know sometimes you hear numbers like 1 in 4, and that can seem abstract, but I know to you this fight is particularly personal. So I'd like you to speak to that and also to the timeline for SNAP recipients if this lawsuit is to proceed.
Yeah, you gave me goosebumps when you mentioned how personal this is to me. The fact of the matter is I know exactly how this feels. I know what hunger looks like. My dad worked at a grocery store and would bring home stale food, candy bars in particular. They'd found next to the dumpster because the boys got to eat. I was a single parent in college, and I lived on food stamps. It kept my son and me fed. Medicaid kept us healthy.
To feed the American people, he is not trying to deal with the healthcare crisis. And he literally was being led around a ballroom by the Japanese prime minister last night in the apparent confusion that he himself is unable to perform the duties as the duly elected president. So I have to say, I'm disturbed to hear that this is even a story, as most of our country is literally in crisis right now.
So I actually do have questions for you about the cuts to the SNAP program and the fact that 42 million Americans will not have food stamp coverage as of Saturday. And we covered it yesterday, and I covered it earlier today, and I covered it tomorrow as well. But this is a report from the House Oversight Committee, the majority. And I talked to the chairman of the committee, who suggested that more legislation would be needed to outline exactly who a president should be able to grant a pardon to. Is that something that you think both parties could agree upon?
Well, I think, first of all, the House needs to come back in session. Mike Johnson has now canceled the House of Representatives for 39 straight days. We are in day 28 of a House shutdown. They are literally not here. The president is overseas, as I just said, and they are about to cut off food assistance to millions of Americans. And so I think it's bizarre that Chairman Comer is going on TV talking about an investigation into a former president who's not even a sitting president over a non-issue while literally Americans are about to starve.
So the reason that SNAP is running out of funding, understand there's a disagreement about the contingency plan, And whether
it's not a disagreement. Literally, Congress approved money for this scenario. The White House is choosing to let Americans go.
Well, the Agriculture Department argues that the contingency funds, $6 billion, is there for natural disaster. I know that that's disputed. But if you are so concerned about SNAP funds running out, why not ask Democrats in the Senate to vote to open up the government? And then the SNAP funding would go. I mean, I understand the dispute about the contingency fund, and that's a real dispute. And that's $6 billion that could fund the SNAP program for 2 to 3 more weeks. But if we're actually talking about long term, why not have Senate Democrats vote to open up the government?
Well, so first of all, I filed legislation in the House of Representatives today. Even though Mike Johnson has shut down the House, there are pro forma sessions happening on the House floor. And today I filed the snapback legislation that would force the administration to release those funds, to not cut off EBT cards to millions of Americans, and that would reimburse states and tribes. So I'm doing my part here in the House, but I cannot vote for a bill until it comes to the House, and Mike Johnson has shut down the House, and the president is nowhere to be found. Now, I'm a former OMB official, and I can tell you that OMB is breaking the law right now. Congress has appropriated the dollars, and state attorney generals have filed suit today in federal court to compel the administration to release those funds because they are breaking the law. And we know that they know that they're breaking the law because just a couple of weeks ago, they moved funds into WIC to save WIC. But they think that they can use the hunger of children to try to leverage Democrats rather than feeding 42 million Americans. And we're not going to stand for it. We're going to sue them. We're going to use the courts. We're going to use Congress. And we're going to do everything we can at the community level to make sure that Americans can put food on the table this weekend.
Post-election ramifications. So just as we had in 2020, I'm concerned with the aftermath. I'm concerned with the confidence in our election system, and I'm concerned with the conversation that we have after the ballots are cast.
Yeah, so Secretary Benson, you have some experience with this because there was that Michigan precinct, I believe it was a Detroit precinct, that Donald Trump really focused on and his team focused on to claim that there was cheating going on inside, that the votes were being changed. You dealt with that at the time. What are the lessons you took to deal with it potentially again, even as early as 26?
All right. I think we have to remember democracy prevailed in 2020, not because there was, it wasn't an unprecedented attack on it by an individual who didn't like that he lost, but because the people didn't budge. Election officials at the local level, voters in Detroit stood up and said very cogently and clearly, the law and the truth and the will of the people are on our side. And so in this moment, these threats are real. And everything I read in the article, we are scenario planning right now and have been for years preparing for this. But I think it's important for people to recognize that in a democracy, the power of the people will always be greater than the people of power when we choose to exercise it. And so in this moment, we have to be prepared for these potential threats yet again, an escalation of these threats over the next year. But at the same time, we cannot forget that our local election officials, our secretaries of state, our state officials, governors, attorneys general as well, and in addition to that, the people on the ground, if we stay rooted.
Look, what we're watching now is a coordinated counterpunch from blue states. It's not just rank and file lawmakers. Governors, attorneys general, and state officials are all stepping up, drafting new statutes, dusting off old ones, and trying to make the rules stick. That matters. Big time. I've said this before, even when a strategy might not land perfectly, people care about the posture. Voters want someone who looks like they'll fight for them. This isn't simply a left versus right internecine fight inside the Democratic coalition. Yes, a lot of the most visible pushback has come from progressives. They're loud and unapologetic, but the appetite for confrontation reaches well beyond them. Take people like Gavin Newsom. He's not the party's far-left standard bearer. Yet he's won support because he's been willing to engage aggressively. Why? Because standing up matters to people. They want action, not careful incrementalism. Whether each tactic will be legally successful is another question. We can't declare winners or losers yet. Short-term outcomes are mixed at best. But that's not the point for many voters. They want to see a visible defense, gestures, lawsuits, bold enforcement, anything that signals resistance. And it's not just the stereotypical activist base. You're seeing older Democratic-leaning women, suburban moderates, and independents who tilt left. They want accountability. They want consequences. They want the other side to feel political cost. And they don't want half measures. There's a thirst not merely for policy wins, but for symbolic retribution. making the opposition pay a price in court, in headlines, in public reputation. I sympathize with that energy. If your base believes the opposing party is actively harming people, the demand is to push back hard. Strategically, this kind of aggressive posture also reshapes the battlefield. It forces the other side into reaction mode. That's exactly the dynamic you want when your opponent's strategy is to drown you in litigation and chaos. Trump, for example, thrives by turning disputes into time-consuming legal fights. Even losses can be victories for him because they wear opponents down. So the answer is, play that game back, make him spend resources, clog the process, raise the political cost. Pass new laws where you can. Enforce the ones on the books. File the suits that test boundaries. Even imperfect wins send a message. You're not passive, you're fighting. Show voters you're in the ring for them. That visibility, more than any single court decision, is what energizes the base and makes the other side think twice.